make sure we get started on time for our speaker, who, as I mentioned earlier, I really appreciate all our speakers who are come to impart their knowledge to us, taking time out of their day. So my name's Bill Steele. I'm the chair of the UCB, and what that means as chair is I run the meetings and sign documents, but anyone else who is a member of the UCB, we all have equal votes, and all your opinions are encouraged to be shared with the other members. So our first item we have on our agenda is to approve our April meeting agenda. Any comments, corrections before I entertain a motion? Okay, could I get a motion to approve our agenda?
This is Terry. I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Terry, as always. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Parks. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, the agenda is approved for April. And then our next administrative item is our March meeting minutes, which I always appreciate Hector getting those put out and up on our Google Drive. Are there any comments, edits to those meeting minutes before we entertain a motion to approve? Okay, I hear none. Do we have a motion to approve our March meeting minutes?
I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Thank you as always, Terry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Parks. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion is carried. So our next part of our meeting is where we have our guest speaker. As I mentioned, I'm always excited to have guest speakers. That's one of the nice things about being on the board is we get a lot of good continuing education out there from industry experts. And the one we have the privilege of hearing today is Dan Powers. I'll briefly read some of his bio, but to start off with, we are very fortunate to have Dan here. He's very well credentialed, so it's always great to have people come here. When I started in this industry, a lot of times it was the local people from the utility industry, and I'm excited as we get into new innovative areas in the utility specter that we have people from other areas. So Dan, as you can see here, is with CoLabs. He's the executive director. It's a nonprofit consortium of more than 35 federally funded research labs, joint university institutes, a broad ecosystem of technology-oriented companies, economic development. He champions on how taxpayer fund research is at taproot of innovation, necessary to help America meet its challenges. And since 2016, he has brought together thousands of people with an interest in scientific discovery, technology, commercialization versus, a whole plethora of things, lab tours, award events, workshops, conference calls, gatherings, so much to go on that, I don't want to take time away from his presentation or questions. He's also a University of Colorado alum in environmental science and has 25 years experience in the policy assessment and public engagement, both for government agencies and economic development organizations. So again, thank you, sir, for being with us, and I will turn that over. I encourage at the appropriate time our board members and Cindy or anyone from your staff, feel free to ask our guests. Let's leverage his experience while we have the benefit of his time. So thank you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate being able to describe CoLabs to the board and be a resource going forward as you get to understand the network that CoLabs works with. I'm certain that there'll be connections that we can make that will help with the different topics that you're researching. I'll add a little bit more to my bio there as well. As Bill mentioned, I'm an environmental scientist from CU Boulder, but after working for the government for 10 years, I switched over into economic development work. I was hired for a 3-month project by the Boulder Chamber in 2004, and that became 9 years of work as the community affairs manager there. And a big topic with that role in the late 2000s was the municipalization effort of Boulder relative to their franchise agreement with Xcel Energy. So I was able to be deeply involved in that topic and have watched that, let's say, interesting policy effort evolve over the last 15 years as I left the chamber in 2011 and 2012, and I've just been able to observe that from the outside. I mention that because in my time at the chamber is when CoLabs was formed in 2007, and I'll get into a little bit of that backstory as we get rolling, but know that I have this interest in what the labs bring to public policy decision-making as a core reason for my interest in accepting the job at CoLabs. I've been there now for 7 years. So let's see, I think I should be able to skip forward here. This. All right, as I mentioned, CoLabs got started in 2007. As you're reading some of this overview here about us, the genesis of CoLabs' creation was in the mid-2000s. It became known back here in Colorado amongst different stakeholders that senatorial horse trading conversations were leading towards potentially moving a couple federal research labs out of Colorado to another state. And the reaction to that was a bit of, who thinks this is a good idea? Why is this a conversation? And the then Governor Bill Ritter's Office of Economic Development and International Trade used a grant to start CoLabs along with the Boulder Chamber, the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, labs such as the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and companies like Xcel Energy and Vaisala, and the did I mention Boulder Chamber? Of course, different chamber organizations. So this entity for CoLabs was formed to quickly describe to elected officials the value of taxpayer-funded research in Colorado. And the first deliverable of the creation of CoLabs was an economic impact study done by the Lead School of Business at CU Boulder, at that time showing that there was about a $1.5 billion impact to the state's economy born of roughly a dozen different labs that were in Colorado. CoLabs at that time created a definition of a federal lab by our in essence perspective is any research entity getting 51% or more of its funding from the federal government. So while those of you who are more deeply familiar with the Department of Energy and the national labs with a capital N and capital L, those are truly in a title sense, the national labs of the country are those with the Department of Energy. To the general public, most elected officials, business leaders, etc., labs that simply have the name national in them are perceived to be national labs. Depending on my audience, I will parse out those nuances if need be, but know that from CoLabs' perspective, that's how we are perceiving the national labs in Colorado. And so to that point, here's a list of some of them. By our count now, and the way that we parcel them out, there are really almost 45 federally funded research entities in Colorado. If there's any societal challenge or topic that you're interested in, there's research happening in Colorado on that topic. And that's part of what CoLabs does, is help connect policy leaders or elected officials and business leaders with those labs to connect whatever is their mission with the research resources and the data that would be in any of these labs. And I'll share this with you afterwards and can make some more details available to you. But at a quick glance, as you look through the names of the entities here, it will give you a sense of the realm of research that they're involved in. And truly this scope, as we've seen over the years, is a network of federal research that's grown up over decades in Colorado that is unlike anywhere else in the country. By our analysis, we have the second highest concentration of federally funded research entities in the country outside of Washington, D.C., where their headquarters are. As I mentioned in that first study back in 2009 regarding the labs, imagine after the first study came out, all of a sudden there were some other hands that were raised saying, how come we weren't part of that study? This is how CoLabs started to realize, well, there's actually more of a network here beyond the say the big guys that everybody knew of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology. There's a much wider network of federally funded entities here than was initially realized 15 years ago. And it continues to grow. I had learned during COVID that the Veterans Administration has a research lab in Denver, and the Food and Drug Administration has a research lab here in the Denver area, actually in the tech center down there in Lakewood. With that then network, I'd like to focus a bit on a couple examples of what's going on in the National Renewable Energy Lab, and particularly some partnerships that are here regionally that we're involved in. And also keep in mind, Collabs as a nonprofit, we are a connector and a convener for officials such as yourselves and business leaders who want to learn more specifically what's going on inside a lab. Who should they know? What kind of partnering options are there? What kind of funding options might there be for any kind of research activity together? And we are the conduit to help introduce the right people to the right people. And then we'll step back. In essence, I don't need to be in every particular conversation with a given lab, but know that I also look to sort of peer over the shoulder of any conversations. And as success stories and feasible, viable partnerships come together, definitely as discoveries manifest and become products, solutions to policies, and companies, widgets, for lack of a better word, that go out into society and are solving problems. Those are the examples that we need at Collabs in our conversations to Congress, because ultimately our mission is to keep the labs funded and keep them here. So as you may imagine as well, the last month and a half has been quite tumultuous and distressing and frankly surreal and gross. And I'm in the middle of that really every day right now. There's no weekends for me right now. Back to a bit more of a focus here. I wanted to get both Sandia and Los Alamos on your radar as partnering currently with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And broadly speaking, I also work with these different Department of Energy labs. So in that convening and connecting, say, manner of activity, keep that in mind if there's other labs here that you might be interested in connecting with there. With these three labs that are together, they particularly have a more recent program, the Q Scout program that you see listed on the right. They are using quantum computing technologies very much at the forefront right now, but they're looking at how quantum computing can be a resource for massive and quicker analyses and problem solving around grid maintenance, grid security, and other types of renewable energy creation, or what's the right word? Integration onto electricity grids. Those three labs are really on the forefront right now of what can be, as part of our nation's electric grid, mostly productivity. That's the right word. Let's say its strength and also its reliability and its resiliency. A quicker overview of NREL as we look to be aware of the different ROI on taxpayer-funded research. We tried to collect these stats, as I mentioned, our economic impact study here. This reminder of what NREL has at a top level of its scope of expertise and its scope of partnerships, I wanted to put on your radar there as well. I'm presuming you all are interacting with NREL quite a bit, and I will find out more perhaps in this conversation. So I wasn't going to go too deep into NREL on information. On the other hand, if anything that we're discussing today prompts a request for an introduction, that's definitely the sort of thing that I can do. I can find the right person within NREL who should be speaking to you based on whatever your topic of interest is. Particularly in the areas that you all are focused on, there are research projects happening with numerous partners, from academic postdocs and professors and their research to smaller companies, as well as the larger corporate entities that would have an interest often in the legacy fossil fuel extraction industry. Their connections with NREL are as practical and savvy as they are, often I'd like to think as aspirational for a new energy paradigm that these companies perceive they need to be leaning into. So I can help make some connections with the kind of projects that are going on that may come up of particular interest to you. And then I wanted to spotlight as well one of the labs. So again, this is federally funded through the Department of Energy. The Institute at Colorado State University has several different programs that are focused on particularly emissions technology. The METEC site up in Fort Collins, we've done tours there a couple times. If your board hasn't actually been there, that would be something I'd specifically like to help arrange, is a visit. You should see what they have outdoors and what also has been approved recently for an expansion of the technologies. There's a couple dozen companies with their own proprietary emission detection technologies on their property, and METEC is the really the coordinator and the third party advocate, I shouldn't say advocate, third party assessor, who is helping to collect data on all these different types of above ground and below ground emission tracking technologies. It's fascinating, and it really is a fantastic example of how different industries can advance in their technologies through, in this case, taxpayer funded Department of Energy projects in cooperation with a research university. There's also, I'll put out, broadly speaking, I picked these three labs to have on your radar, as I'm familiar with the kinds of research they do that can be an adjunct to the more hard tech energy technologies that would most likely be of interest to your board. The National Ecological Observatory Network headquarters is in Boulder. They have over 80 different observation sites across North America, and the type of ecological data that they're collecting is quite literally everything from atmospheric chemistry, think within the lower 80 to 100 feet above the ground, that level of atmospheric chemistry they're collecting, and everything from moisture levels to pollen samples to beetles to wind speeds. They can have all sorts of data across the country from different ecotones that could be of interest. The USGS and their North Central Climate Adaptation Center also is collecting various types of data that I perceive could be helpful in broader extreme weather grid threats that you might be looking at, and perhaps other types of technologies and their impact on the environment when it comes to either extractive technologies or integration of renewables into the grid. The USGS could also be a resource. And similarly, the US Department of Agriculture, they're monitoring for different types of atmospheric chemistry components, can be another source of data that could be helpful. And that would be, as I get to know more of the kind of projects you're working on, I can help connect you with the USDA as well. I'll mention all of those. Of course, as you've seen in the news, there's not one entity right now that is not in a deeply fearful, if not already impacted state of having brilliant people being fired and or defunded with no kind of strategic rationale or vision towards why they've been removed. They're just simply a number and a name, not even a name, actually, just a number who've been removed. And that will be an asterisk right now as to who we're able to connect you with, if they're actually still working or otherwise their department or group is still functioning. But that being said, I apologize. I'm trying not to be too negative, but that is the reality of where we're at right now. Is there's a deconstruction happening of our research entities in the country, and much of what I'm alluding to as being resources has this almost tentative or uncertain context to it right now. And then just two last slides here. I wanted to reference more broadly a way to perceive this network of federal labs here in the state. We have other types of benefits from having the research here and the scientists and the rest of the staff at these labs. In particular, the intangible impact of their volunteerism and their accessibility to the media and to students. I have daughters who are now in high school, but through their time in grade school and junior high, being able to connect them with scientists to answer questions and just understand the kind of research they're doing has been fantastic. They also are often, all these staff can be advisors to startup companies and large companies. And this brain trust that we have here in Colorado is incredible and something that we're fortunate across all different types of entities to actually have in a concentration that is very uncommon compared to how it might be in some other states. Our activities, as I mentioned, this impact study, think again, convening and connecting is much of what we do, as well as advocacy. I will mention too that picture on the lower right is from our annual awards event. We do solicit each year for labs to provide us with details of their research activities that they would most like to spotlight. There's a whole vetting process and a team of experts that reviews these applications. And then we have a gala event at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science and spotlight some of the great research that's coming out of labs here in Colorado. And so let's see, then our last note, here's just a few of our members. You can glance quickly from these logos. There's a gathering recently with Congressman Neguse. That's actually a statement there regarding the defunding of labs that we were asking him for help in a couple specific ways. So we definitely stay focused with our advocacy. And lastly, I'll leave you with this one phrase. Even though this network here that is now, our most recent econ study, which was done right before COVID, and we were just starting on our next update in January when everything that started to change within the labs has happened. But our most recent estimates are now that it's a nearly $4 billion impact to the state's economy, with several dozen federally funded research entities here in the state. There's about 20,000 direct and indirect employees. So think actual lab federal employees, as well as those who are employed by the various contractors and vendors who operate in partnership with these labs. And it's definitely a puzzle piece for us to continue to nurture here in the state of Colorado. That being said, these labs located in Colorado are a national asset. They are leveraged by universities and companies and economic development groups and politicians from across the country, if not indeed the world. And we are proud to have them here and to be the nonprofit organization that champions their value. I look forward to connecting them with you all as you would find most helpful, and look to learn actually a bit more of. I'm familiar with your board from the outside. At times I've seen you referenced in the news, but I'm only recently getting to know more of what it is you do. So I hope that I can be a resource for you as you're focusing in on just how to protect our energy paradigm and our energy system here in Colorado. Been here since '87, and I'm grateful you do what you do. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Questions for Dan? I mean, valuable resource, a lot of information. Let me ask you kind of one that, do you do work in other states, or is it just strictly Colorado is where your work is focused at?
So with Colabs, we are a Colorado focused entity.
Okay.
And the references that I was showing to Sandia and Los Alamos is a newer, as of say 2024, a newer set of interests that Colabs has. We began with this more parochial interest in protecting or advocating for labs in our state. But recently, just in the last year, how these labs partner with each other to leverage each other's resources has become more and more apparent. And so let's say still 95% of our effort is here in Colorado, but depending on the topic, and when it comes to quantum computing and energy resources, and the underpinning of both of those are really supercomputers and supercomputing, that's where Los Alamos and Sandia are connected in. There's actually connections with NREL and Idaho National Laboratory that continues to grow relative to energy paradigms. And then also up in up in Laramie, the National Center for Atmospheric Research 2 years ago located their newest supercomputer in Laramie. And that has brought in Wyoming into more of our frequent conversations and understanding that there's now a federal research asset there in Wyoming, and we would like to continue to nurture the relationship with that, particularly that resource, but also that state.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I ask is I do some consulting work, and right now I'm assisting the New Mexico Public Regulatory Commission with some advisory work, and I know they're had a lot of staff turnover, and they're always looking for opportunities for to be educated what's going on out there in the the world we live in. So, other questions for Dan? Great presentation.
Bill, I have a question.
Yes.
My question is regarding all these different monitoring, data collection, all the work that's done across the entities that you showed us. And I know that some of it's satellite and some terrestrial and atmospheric and all of this. Do those systems continue to operate now during this time of uncertainty?
Yes. So back to, as I described at the beginning, the federally funded research entities. The nuances to how all these labs have been impacted are probably not as well understood by the general public, because the headlines and assault on layoffs, et cetera, are not always that clear. So to your question, Cindy, I'm sorry, I'm thinking like 6 different thought bubbles in my head right now as to how to answer this
Okay.
stuff. So think of it as, under the Department of Commerce is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and is NIST, National Institutes of Standards and Technology, and also the National Telecommunications and Administration, Information Administration. Also, there's the U.S. Department of Agriculture. There's the U.S. Geological Survey, which is under the Department of Interior. There's the Centers for Disease Control up in Fort Collins, funded by the National Institutes of Health. Those entities that I've all just listed are the ones that were able to most immediately be affected by directives from the Trump administration on layoffs or budget freezes or other types of, say, administrative controls, such as, I know at the Department of Commerce, all of their scientists, if they had a debit card for their department, those have all been limited to no more than $1 purchase on their cards. So any kind of materials or travel to a conference or any type of activity, that's all been frozen in terms of spending. They've also given a no travel allowed directive to federal employees, so they can't attend conferences or even go visit people across town at a coffee shop. And then there's just simply the layoffs that have happened, or right now there's different acronyms for these: early retirement or other types of by your own choice. If you would like to step away, you can do so and get some kind of severance. That has been happening under the umbrellas of those actual federal agencies. Entities such as the National Center for Atmospheric Research, that is a National Science Foundation entity. Many of the research entities in Colorado are funded by NSF. They have funding that would have been approved and is, in essence, a contractual arrangement where their funding has been, as of the continuing resolution that kept the government open in mid-March, think of it as those contracts are still in force, and hence their funding is still there, is still valid through the end of what would be their contract year of fiscal year 2025 through September 30th of this year. So there hasn't been the same kind of immediate impacts to many of the entities, research entities, that aren't actual direct federal agencies. Now, that said, there are other ways that the administration, through the Office of Personnel Management, is making either assertions of authority or otherwise making directives that are very confusing and have led to a lot of turmoil within those agencies, because people within National Science Foundation funded entities are not certain if they have to, in essence, listen to what might be directives for them to stop funding certain things or even provide information on certain programs. And yet the culture of fear right now that's really been instilled is that people are obeying orders from the administration, whether at first glance, and certainly I'll say as an advocate on the outside, we're not funded by the federal government. I don't have the same type of concern that I'm going to lose my job if I speak up with at least questions, if not comments on all of this. But anyone who's federally funded through whatever chain of connecting the dots of funding, they're taking at face value whatever are these directives, because they're very sincerely and reasonably concerned that if they raise objections, that they will be fired first and have to ask questions later, or get into whatever might be some kind of legal challenge to that status. But that doesn't provide any real immediate relief to whatever could have been their loss of employment. So I know I'm providing you with a lot of context, but I think if there's a particular program or realm of research that you all are following or involved with now, it would take a few questions to figure out what is its status. Is it actually still funded, and but yet when would it be funded until? Or are there people who've been laid off or some kind of impact to that program? And then let me end on this. The hardest thing has been from the outside that, compared to all the years past, this information on who to connect with, who's in charge of a certain program, or how many people are involved in a certain project, like for our economic impact study, all those answers would just be given to us easily by the public affairs person or their communications team or the lab director, et cetera. Since January 28th, everyone's answer has been, we don't discuss personnel matters to anybody. Or you'll have to ask Washington, D.C. headquarters, and there isn't anyone who answers that phone call. Or who is the person I can ask? And if they don't say, we don't discuss that at all, they'll say, well, that person actually has retired or resigned or was fired. And there isn't actually anybody in that capacity to answer the question you're asking. And by the way, you'd have to submit a FOIA request anyways to get that information now. It's a very intentional mishmash of miscommunication and lack of communication. So it's a challenge now for companies and nonprofits, or really any researchers, to figure out what exactly is the status of a given research program and or its funding.
Well, I'm going to switch to a little more cheerful note, I hope, which, looking at the intention, maybe not the current practice in this time of uncertainty, of these labs with respect to the educational institutions in Colorado. I saw a mention of, I think it might have been under NREL, internships and postdocs. And I thought maybe you could talk about, sort of theoretically, what is set up the approach for, Colorado students and researchers, et cetera.
Sure. All right. Yes, this is, let me answer that in a, as if everything's still going the way that it has been. That's continued to grow. The investment in grants and internship programs across the country and with our federal labs has been one of the best ways that we're able to fund joint institutes with research universities and otherwise provide this funding via labs right into research universities, and not necessarily just R1 universities. This is into different levels of state colleges as well. The students are able to either pick a theme of research that they want to get into, or more often imagine a menu is provided by different federal agencies of topics that they already have an existing research activity happening with some staff, and they're wanting the students to apply to then become part of that team, and in different types of relationships in terms of the cadence of their meeting or the amount of time that they're required to participate. The students are able to be a resource to the scientists and really go down into the weeds, very much a lot of data collection or data management, data research for, well, you saw that list of the labs that I had at the beginning, almost any kind of earth science, atmospheric science, public health, energy sciences that the students would be interested in. The real outcome of that kind of work that we see through our meetings with different companies, and it comes out in our economic impact study, is that the companies who are then providing some kind of service, or more so building some kind of product in the quote real world, they are engaged with these programs at the universities and the colleges, and they are providing information about the sort of jobs that they have and the skills that they need for the positions in their companies. And that's informing the curriculum at the colleges, so for the students to then be leaning into that particular set of skills that they need to develop to step into jobs when they graduate. And it ends up being really probably a 50-50 ratio between the students who choose to stay in academia and continue to research even further in that kind of lab setting, and other students who very much realize I'm not looking to get, say, another degree or continue to work at school. I want to go work for one of these companies. And that, in the advocacy sense, and what we're looking to bring to bear, frankly, right now in a lot of our conversations with Congress, is here's how the activity at these labs, and particularly the internship programs with universities and colleges, are the workforce pipeline for these innovative industries that we say that we're wanting to develop across the country. And we'll continue to advocate for those. And I see many of these programs that have initially been cut or are on a list of threatened to be defunded. This is how, with our private sector partners, we really are hoping we can save many of these kinds of programs and funds, because we're able to tell the stories, the success stories, very pragmatic impact for our country that these programs have when we fund the education of our next generation of workers.
Thank you. I don't know if I see anybody else's hands. I have more questions for you, but I don't want to monopolize the Q&A here. So, Ron Lair, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm going to put in the chat a link to a paper that describes a decision by the Colorado Commission that depended on testimony from a researcher at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory named Michael Milligan. The situation was a wind company had bid wind into public service companies' bid scheme, and they were turned down 3 times. Turns out public service company, they added $61 million to the bid price of the cost that they basically made up. And Milligan was instrumental in getting the economic facts before the commission, which then ordered the company to buy the first commercial wind farm in Colorado. So the testimony of an NREL researcher was absolutely critical to getting wind started as a commercial reality here in Colorado. And it now provides more power than any other resource, at least according to the disclosure I got yesterday from Public Service Company. So my question is, are the experts at the labs that you work with available to provide expert witness testimony to groups like the consumer advocate that you're meeting with today, or others, to bring that information onto the record, which is absolutely critical for decision-making regarding public regulation of utilities?
I'd say the short answer is yes, and then there would be various protocols around how they are allowed to do so. And my first thought, I'm thinking experience from past experience, very likely federal agency employees right now would have the hardest time being given permission to do so. So back to my reference to think NIST and NOAA and the NTIA or the CDC, I would expect that before the presidential administration transition, there would be a protocol where they would have to get approval through a few layers of their agencies, government affairs and public communications folks, probably government affairs really, and even legal being the ones who would vet this. To have a scientist from NREL or from NEON or the National Center for Atmospheric Research, for example, I think would be easier. And that gets to the nature of how their organizations are actually funded and the types of then embedded oversight that there is. As you know, NREL is technically operated by a consortium, the Alliance for Sustainable Energy, and they wouldn't have the same protocols necessarily on how they're not in the same way federal employees at NREL as those other entities that I mentioned were. I think, though, right now, Ron, the likelihood of anyone volunteering to speak is almost zero, because they're all afraid that, boy, especially if it has anything to do with renewable energy or atmospheric science, climate science, they'd be afraid that there'd be some kind of repercussions, even if on paper this is all okay and has not been a problem in the past, or they're doing so as a private citizen. Things that can be another way of characterizing things. I'm not certain right now, as of April 25, that it would be as easy to get someone to do so unless they were subpoenaed. I'm also not a lawyer. No one's asked me that. So I'm thinking just more of previous experience with these things.
Seems to be somebody famous in history said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Yeah.
The guideline at the time we presented that case to the commission was that the experts could testify to what they knew, but wouldn't make any policy proposals. They wouldn't support or comment on any policy proposals. That would be up to others. But what they knew is developed by funding from the taxpayers, and it ought to be available to decision makers who have public responsibilities. So good luck to us all on that.
Yes, it's interesting. So there is a protocol right now. Trying to think of how it could help you. The scientists at NOAA, for example, NOAA is under particular threat of defunding and de-staffing, people being fired. They have to, or they're allowed to, answer questions by, for example, Congressman Neguse, if he is there visiting to learn more about their science. However, on the front end, there's certain questions that if he were to ask, say, I should explain this because I was just having it explained to me on Friday. Yeah, maybe I should be careful because I don't want to misstate how things are legally. I think you're just in a tougher spot where right now there's not a smooth protocol for getting scientists to be able to speak to entities such as yourself or even the media, outside of perhaps another type of legal compulsion that they would be given.
Dan, I would err on the side of caution and just keep your powder dry on that.
Yeah.
As your former colleague.
I think I would ask a follow-up on former chairs Ron Lair's question. So we do put into evidence in proceedings like attached to sworn testimony, papers, white papers and research papers, whatever comes out of various labs, NREL, also Berkeley, um, other work that we see. But then, of course, the authors are not witnesses and, you know, subject to cross examination, which, of course, is not going to be like TV cross examination, but more to get evidence into the record. So I think that's the leap that we can't make. But we definitely do use relevant research materials as part of our case, and they're accepted as evidence. Well, they're accepted as fact from those agencies, from those research entities. Um, there are occasionally times in my tenure in this job when the commission is doing something like an informational meeting, you know, it's not relevant to a particular contested case, where they'll have someone from one of the labs speak about the facts, you know, really not an opinion about what should happen in terms of policy. But I thought maybe I'd ask a question about the relationship of these labs, although federally funded, and working with educational institutions in Colorado. Is there any work related to the Colorado government?
Oh, to the state government.
Yes, yes.
I'm aware of data being leveraged by it's like the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. But I'm actually not as familiar with say particular state level partnerships with different state agencies.
Well,
I would expect there are. It would make sense, but I apologize. I'm not as familiar with those. There is a realm of economic activity interaction, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, with their early stage or proof of concept grants under the umbrella of the Advanced Industries Program. There are each session twice a year, or each cohort of applicants. I know there are projects that come out of the R1 universities, for example, that are very typically partially funded by federal grants. And there's some kind of business concept that is being pitched for additional grant funding through OEDIT. That's one connection I can think of between the labs and federal research entities and the state.
that's actually very interesting that OEDIT would be involved, but it makes sense. Bill, I think that we're at the end of our guest speaker remarks. But I want to thank you, Dan. This has been very informative and impressive work that's been done, at least up till now, in our state, to be proud of.
Yeah, I want to echo Cindy's comments as well, too. And again, thank you for taking time out of, I'm sure, a very busy schedule to be with us today. And please don't be a stranger. If we can ever do anything to assist you, reach out to myself or Cindy, and we'll now let you back to your, several busy full-time day jobs
Yes.
that you need to take care of.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. This is going to be a thick week, it appears, with some more announcements happening relative to some labs. But this is a labor of love kind of effort. Very similar to what I perceive your board does here. This is something that is the right thing to do on behalf of Colorado and our country. So
definitely
keep at it.
Yes, you too as well. Okay.
All right, I'll step out. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, bye-bye.
Cindy, our pending case strategy discussion.
I think Joe hasn't been able to join us quite yet.
Okay.
So why don't we switch it up and have the discussion of the CNG Colorado natural gas?
Yes,
pending, yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, I see Ron's out there as well as Carrie, so that sounds like a good plan if these gentlemen are ready with their discussion.
Yep, we're ready.
Thank you.
So this is Carrie. Let me introduce you. Kirkendall, who's an analyst with the UCA and has got a strong financial and accounting background. And joining him will be Ron Fernandez. Ron, could you go on camera, please? Ron, maybe you are. I have to scroll through. Ron Fernandez is a chartered financial analyst and works with us as a rate financial analyst, and in particular on the sort of the market and corporate structure type of issues, in addition to in a rate case capital structure and those type of matters. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Carrie. Thank you.
Sure. Our discussion is broken up in a couple of different pieces. I will talk to you a little bit about C&G, kind of explain who they are and what they want with this filing. And then Ron is going to discuss some of the financial considerations he looks at when he kind of reviews these cases. And I'll talk about some of the other considerations that make this case a little different from just normal reorganization cases. And then we'll basically, have discussion and questions after that, because there's something that I want to ask, just kind of maybe pick the brains of all of the experience that's in the group here to try and maybe give us some guidance on how to proceed on these types of cases. First, C&G is a local distribution utility, gas distribution utility here in Colorado. They serve approximately about 25,000 customers in southeastern Colorado. They have 4 rate districts: Bailey, Cripple Creek, Pueblo West, and Eastern. They're headquartered here in the Denver metro area, and they own approximately, and C&G is a subsidiary or a subsidiary of Summit Utilities Group. And Summit Utilities owns about 5 other regulated utilities besides C&G, and as well as a host of unregulated businesses. What they are asking for is, Hector, if you could put up the slide that I provided to you so I can kind of. Okay, what we're seeing here is basically the corporate structure of Summit Utilities. And as you can see, Summit, the blue squares are its regulated utilities, and the orange are the unregulated businesses that Summit Utilities has in its purview. Now, as you can see, they are really governed or really shielded by several holding companies. And so what they're asking for in this filing is to take all of the regulated utilities and move them under one holding company. They're going to basically carve out a holding company under Summit Utilities and place all of its regulated utilities under that. Secondly, they are asking to refinance some of the debt that's been issued at the holding company level and reorganize it up into the new holding company. And so while, a lot of this is normal everyday stuff for utilities and what's something that we see all the time, Summit Utilities is again has this web of first of all, it's a private company and privately held, and so the utilities that they control are really governed by a lot of holding companies and they are very, very tight-lipped or very, very protective of the information that is coming out of the holding company. So it's really hard for us to get information from them regarding the operations of the holding companies. So Ron is going to talk about a little bit of the financial considerations related to this case.
Ron? Ron, we can't hear you, or okay. Um,
Did we lose him?
I think maybe you have to leave and come back, Ron, because your connection's not right. But Kerry, why don't we get back to what um, Ron was going to add and go to the further information that you were
Right.
going to provide.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. And so, again, while Ron looks at some of the financial considerations are not the only thing that we consider in these cases. One of the things I think that prevails or that really colors these cases is our experience with these utilities in other cases. And so with CNG, we have had concerns about the corporate structure and their willingness or unwillingness to provide information about the organization and how the workings are between utilities, unregulated and regulated. And so that relationship or that inability to provide information really, gives us some pause when looking at cases like this. And so I think my question to this group is, from your experience when operating with private utilities that are shielded with many different operating companies, what is your experiencing and how to penetrate that corporate veil, if you will, or that protectionist kind of uh, that mentality from utilities, private utilities.
Well, I was going to ask Carrie, I mean, my thoughts on this is something they've come before the commission and they want the commission's blessing. And how does this either benefit or holds the ratepayer harmless? And if they are not willing to provide the information, then how does the commission know that it's in the public interest to approve this? And my experience in the past dealing, and I know former Chair Lair can share his experience that we all had with the former U.S. West, that if you can't get information out of them, it's just a down and dirty fight the whole time. So I guess that's the fundamental question. If they're not willing when they're coming forward to give you information, it's not going to get any better afterwards.
Can people hear me now?
I
Yes, Ron.
can.
Okay. Had to switch computers. I have lots of trouble with Teams meetings.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Okay, as Kerry mentioned, CNG filed for a reorganization, and just kind of generically, what I've looked at in reorganizations is why is the company doing this, and what is the impact to ratepayers? And Kerry already mentioned that reason they're doing that is to kind of clean up the corporate structure and put all of their regulated utilities under one holding company. And as far as impacts to the ratepayers, there's no immediate impacts to the ratepayers. The allocations are still going to be the same from the entities above, and it doesn't change any of the costs at CNG itself. But there's one possible future changes or impacts to ratepayers, and that's with the refinancing. As part of this reorganization, the company is planning to refinance some of the debt and consolidate it at the Summit level holding company. And again, when reviewing refinancing, look at why is the company doing this, and is there any changes in rates, credit ratings, or any impacts to ratepayers? So CNG, the reason they're doing this is they want to consolidate their debt issuances so they can issue larger debt issues and presumably get better rates and better treatment in the marketplace. So will they get better rates? Remains to be seen. Rates are tending to go up with what's happening in the economy. So the longer this drags out, probably the lower chance that they're going to be able to get lower rates. So that is the one impact that could impact ratepayers when a new rate case is filed. And I don't know if Carrie mentioned or not, but they've committed to file a rate case in 2026. So that's when the debt costs and all the other costs will be considered. So turn it back to you, Carrie.
Yep. And so that what Ron just mentioned was one of the things I was going to tell you guys next, that they haven't had a rate case since 2018. And so as a part of a settlement from a previous case, they have agreed to bring a rate case at the end of 2026. So we think that a lot of this reorganization and is just cleaning up their corporate structure in order to prepare for the rate case that's coming in 2026. And so again, just a lot of getting information from them is really, really like pulling teeth. And we've had some experience with trying to deal with getting information with them out of the about the operating companies, and it is just the courts are really, really, really hesitant to give them or to really open up that operating company, and so they're only going to go as far as they really, really, really need to, even in the event that we've shown there's some kind of weird things going on. So just wanted to kind of tap this group's knowledge about how to get beneath that corporate veil and try to get information out of those operating companies.
Bill, in addition to triggering regulatory PTSD, mentioned US West, and they had an explicit business strategy called the cash cow and the star. The cash cow was the regulated entity, and the stars were unregulated firms that they surrounded the cash cow with and bled the cash cow dry, or tried to. Our work at the commission was to defend against that, and we did that by imputing to their rates many of the illegal things that they were doing, like stealing revenue streams from the directory, et cetera. One of the two things that come from that experience. One is to think about the merger approval as having conditions on it. So what are the conditions on the merger approval? It should be all the transparency ideas that you have in terms of them coming forward periodically with the information that you need to make your life easy. Another one that we did with US West was a management audit. If they're saying they want to manage their corporation differently, then having them pay for and present a management audit from a third-party firm that you select and reports to you on the benefits of that restructuring might be something to consider. What else, Bill, comes back to you as you think about the US West experience?
Well, I think some of that was the bad thing is, as Ron said, they had the monster vac and they were sucking all the money out of the regulated, and then the holding company made them, try to fight to get anything back. So I think some of the things we tried to look at was some, infrastructure commitment dollars, kind of at what would be some of the financing costs going forward, things like that. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. You want to put some conditions on the front end, because if you don't, you're going to play havoc ever trying to get anything out of them. But yeah, some conditions we saw that, and I know Ron Fernandez had been with the phone company, but we saw that a lot with the small independents that they were very cash rich, and these holding companies, that was the sole purpose, was to get these companies and take the money out. So I would make conditions as far as, even what debt equity ratios might be. It doesn't hurt to ask. They can always tell you no, and you can go from there. But such things as financing, debt equity ratio, some boundaries, basically what the term they use a lot, guardrails, information type thing. But I would get at the front end of this, not try to get it at the back end, because it'll never happen.
Yeah, one idea that Bill's comments reminded me of is the notion that their previously cozy relationships with their financial providers, financial service providers, could be challenged by having them go out to bid for all of those services and make the financial firms compete to be the underwriter or the sales agent or whatever for their financings. I don't know if their financings are large enough to be of interest, but it's an idea and a challenge to them to say, you've been drinking at the country club with these people from Goldman for how many years, and wouldn't it be nice to give Bank of America a chance or whatever? Might disrupt the cozy relationship and get a better deal on the financing.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that we know that, JP Morgan is their is a consultant at the corporate level for them. And so, I mean, that was one of the questions that we had, is why is one of the largest commercial lenders and private equity firms, involved in a utility that serves 25,000 people.
Yeah, we saw during that breakdown of the telephone industry after 1983 a form of corruption that was probably hit its height in the Enron situation, but also Tyco, WorldCom, others were giving contracts to the consulting side of their accounting firm and then leaning on the accountants to sign phony accounting records, some of which were filed at the FCC. I spent 2.5 years just personally being led by the nose by whistleblowers through a corruption on that basis. So look for, if they're using an accounting firm or any other kind of certifying firm, and then also dealing with that firm's consulting arm, then they've got leverage inside that consulting firm to do harm. So that's a kind of corruption that we learned a lot about around 2000. So
If I could just jump in, I'm sorry, Ryan, but you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to let folks know, the UCA does not have audit authority under our statute, but the PUC staff does. To the extent that they conduct an audit, and what they find is not public unless they are able to put it into evidence in a particular case, a rate case as an example, through the discovery process. And that has been done in the past. And I would also just want to mention that we don't have any reason to think that there's any of those activities of Enron, for example, of fraud or anything related to CNG. What happened in the telecom world was out of control, and we don't have any reason to think that's the case here. We just have what's in front of us in these proceedings, and in this particular one is one where we're looking for more information, and haven't concluded anything yet. Um, and I will mention also that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has some authority over even local distribution gas companies. But to the extent they're investigating and are able to obtain information through whatever they call their audit process, that wouldn't be public unless the commission chooses to act on a recommendation from staff there. So that's another sort of pocket of regulation over these companies.
When you see a firm that has mixed regulated and unregulated firms in it, it raises a red flag on the cash cow and the star kind of corruption. And it needs to be justified. The FERC does have some jurisdiction when there are transactions of certain kinds between regulated and unregulated firms in the same holding company. But it's an area that deserves a hard look, and hard questions need to be asked and answered because the incentives are definitely to rip off the regulated firm and inflate the earnings of the unregulated companies. We've seen it over and over again, and it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. So it needs to be questioned whenever you see it. Ask questions.
Yeah, I we're definitely doing that within the context of PUC, procedures, and but appreciate the advice. Bill, I think that would conclude our discussion on
Okay.
the PUC stock pledge case.
Yep.
And I'm
Thank
gonna.
you, guys.
Oh, thank you,
Thank
Carrie.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ron.
you guys for the good work.
Yeah, they're doing great work in
Yeah.
that proceeding.
The whole staff does.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I totally agree. I'm very proud of the team. I'm going to stand in Joe's place to go back to item number 1, the wildfire mitigation plan of public service, or Excel Energy. Simply to say that information that's public, this is a huge case. The company's proposal was about a $2 billion plan. To a lot of its prevention, using the term mitigation, it doesn't capture it entirely in my mind in terms of just sort of common usage of the words. So what is public right now, as of Friday, is that all the different parties to the proceeding, and there are many, reached unanimous settlement in principle in the case, and we all committed. We're included. UCA joined the settlement, and we committed to the commission to file the actual settlement with the specifics by the 18th, which is, I guess, the end of this week. So there's the specifics of the settlement are not public yet, but I will say that to the extent that it's fully in the record, is that we, the UCA, was very focused on cost recovery. That particular issue, of course, is our wheelhouse. But I'll also say that in this proceeding, you had a very strong presence of Boulder, and a lot of that is pivots off of the Marshall Fire that happened a couple years ago and was within Boulder County. So we're looking forward to the settlement becoming public, and therefore we would be able to talk about it more openly. So I do apologize. We don't have much to say except what I just said. So more to come.
Well, thank you for the efforts on that, Cindy. any more discussion under a pending case strategy, Cindy?
Oh, no, that's it for today. Thank you.
Okay. And then we go to other issues, discussion of election for 2025 UCB chair and vice chair. Do we have any updates on that one, Cindy?
No, we don't. I think
Okay.
it's again an opportunity for your request to board members. So I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we probably need to have somebody. I'm not going to be able to make every meeting. I won't be there next month in May. I've got a training in New Mexico, and I've done it for a number of years. And although it's enjoyable, I think it's always good to get some fresh horses and fresh faces in there to change things up and get other people the opportunity. So I would ask that some of you consider if that's something you could be willing to do. So.
If I could
Any, yeah,
add
Cindy,
one thing
please.
to that, Bill, I know some of our members are overextended with their commitments to various boards and maybe being an officer of that board, those boards. So I would just ask those members to look ahead, say to, this time next year or there, sometime next year to whether you can squeeze this in, UCB, the leadership role, into your planning of your future commitments of that nature.
Yes, and um, so that takes us down. Do we have any new business or updates from anyone or Cindy or Hector that we need to discuss?
I will just say that our May meeting, which is Hector, the May meeting is, um, I don't have that date off the top of my head.
The May meeting is on May 12th.
May 12th, okay. So that will be right after the legislative session adjourns for the year, which is May 7th. So Joe Pereira, our deputy director, will give a presentation on what the legislature did this session regarding our issues, energy, and energy related type of legislation. And then we only meet every other month until the end of the year, since the legislatures uh, won't be in session. So anyone who has suggestion for speakers for these upcoming meetings, please give them to me, to Hector, to Bill, and we glad to hear your suggestions.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. And I would like to remind everybody that Hector does put in our Google Drive, our meeting minutes, the presentations, the pending strategy reports. There's a whole wealth of information in there. So I thank Hector for doing that. And I encourage everybody to look at that. So unless we have some other business we need to deal with, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn our meeting. Did I get a motion?
So moved. This is Terry.
Thank you, Terry. Second?
I second.
Thank you very much. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned, and I won't be able to be at the May meeting. I'll be teaching in Albuquerque, but I look forward to seeing you at the meeting after that. And if anything comes up at the interim, feel free to reach out to Cindy or myself. So hope you all have a good day, and we will see you later.
Have a good week.
See you.